Welcome to the ATA podcast, where we talk to former elite athletes sharing their insights and wisdom derived from successfully transitioning into life beyond the game. So, very warm welcome to the Athlete Transition Accelerator. Carl and I, once again, are delighted to be joined by another fascinating guest who I'm sure is going to give us a wonderful insight into the transition from elite sport to life beyond an industry and the wider life that exists outside of those sporting chapters. And today, our guest is Kristine Sommer, a former international rugby player with the USA, a lady who's captained her country, played in 2 World Cups, and had a club career that's taken her into the UK and, of course, domestically in the US. So, Kristine, a very warm welcome. Thank you very much for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you for having me. Excited for the chat.
Great. So obviously, as we say in the intro, we're always talking about transition, but we get a really diverse array of guests on the podcast. And I think it's a nice way just to kick things off, to take you back into that sporting chapter. I know for you, to your credit, it's a 14-year chapter. So you played at the top flight for a long, long time. If you had to pull out 1 or 2 memories, things that give you a real sense of pride now that you can reflect, having hung up the proverbial boots, what memories come to mind to elicit those emotions of pride for you?
I mean, World Cup selections, I think people assume those stand out the most, but I have a lot of memories of the team, little glimpses of post-match celebration or post-match sorrow, I guess, that come up. Those are probably the biggest memories for me. Or you mentioned the Prem, so my first selection in playing for Quins, now thinking that was a long time ago. I think my first season was 2018, so I have these big moments that really rugby has only brought me into those spaces and give me the opportunities for those big moments. Um, it's interesting to hear the highlight, because after you retire, it just seems like such a facade. It seems so unreal, like a different lifetime,
Yeah.
even though it was only a few years ago. And coming back to the States, especially in my professional career, like my athletic career seems to fall to the wayside. So it's, if anything, it's good to recognize the memories. But I don't like fall back to like a few big spotlight moments. Obviously, World Cup in this scene, especially the last one played in 22, being so large with sold out fan bases and so much more interaction with fans, uh, comes to mind. But I think of more selections. I think of more team engagements. I think of more posts, like the 2 days after World Cup, where just debauchery. Um, where I can only give so many
Of
details,
Yeah.
course. Yeah.
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 or like the hard World Cup selection camps where emotions are high, tensions are high, and you're just in a very vulnerable space. Those are the memories that come back to me when I get asked that
No, I
question.
like that perspective because it's talking very much a little bit behind the scenes, that sense
Yeah.
of community and that sense of team, and
Yeah.
something we'll touch on later. Some of the roles you're doing now, one of the peers in something you're involved in, Conrad Smith. We spoke to him recently, and he spoke of that team environment and
Yeah.
winning against the odds, going and winning in South Africa, and it was very much, yes, these celebrated moments, these World Cups, fabulous, but the sorrows and the highs. I think what you're alluding to there is that team, that inner sanctum, that dressing room that very few people get to ever see, but those bonds are very strong and in many cases last a lifetime, long after you've retired. So I think, yeah, that's a lovely perspective to put on the memories.
Yeah. I mean, I talk about one experience. You mentioned the captaincy, not something I thought I would do. Kate's been captain for a while and a great and amazing leader, but one of the Pac 4 series when she was away, I was named captain. So that's probably one of the biggest highlights emotionally, but then also the other side, like that game we lost to Canada. So it's such a huge honor, and then you put so much pressure and just focus on yourself to hit whatever level for the team on that day. So that one has a very conflicting emotional response internally, like highest of highs and the lowest of lows.
Yeah, and you know, it's
That's what
funny
keeps you in
because
it. Yeah.
we've just literally been speaking with an Olympian, a Canadian lady, coincidentally, which made me think of that, Jenny, who
Yeah.
talks about being a double Olympian but not finishing necessarily in the way that she wanted to, and that sense of
Right.
conflict that you're alluding to, that there's externally people often position these wonderful highlights, and it takes time to be able to look back on them and see them because your mind often takes you to these conflicted feelings. And there's another classic case in point. You go, well, it was a great honor to be a captain, but you follow on sentence, but we didn't win and we lost to Canada. And actually, it's a bit
Yeah.
conflicting. That's very, very common. I think that elite
Yeah.
athletes are sometimes their own harshest critics.
Right.
So those reflections are sometimes taking you into the disappointments rather than those wonderful areas that you can be so proud of.
Yeah. But it's crazy how fast you have to move past all those um, emotions to get to the next piece of the game or a training or the next tournament. So maybe that's something that has affected me in a positive way. But sometimes I should dwell on things more, but I'm so used to being like, we don't have time. We got to
Yeah.
move on. We got to go
Yeah.
to the next thing.
Yeah.
And I think it's
Um,
a humility trait as well that so many elite athletes display that nobody feels particularly comfortable talking about. Look at me and look at all the great things I've done. But nonetheless, I think
right.
the build-up we've given you is all factually correct. So that anybody listening knows, well, you've done some great things. You're very humble in your
Yeah, I
answer and you've
appreciate
taken it
that.
back to team. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
credit to you. So, Carl,
Yeah.
I know you were
Perfect.
about to jump in. Then I cut
Yeah.
you off. So
No, no, no. All good. I think I like that you've mentioned the changing rooms
Yeah.
because we've spoken to hundreds of people, and more often than not, the changing room will come up as an area that they miss and
Right.
actually really enjoyed. But it's always been behind the scenes. It's
Yeah.
never been a public verbalization. So for you to say that, and I was part of changing rooms. I was part of a changing room with James actually, and it is such fantastic times. You can't talk
Yeah.
about it, but fantastic times. But just to, I suppose, bring it back a little bit to transition. Just take us into that period of your actual transition when you actually left rugby. Was there a specific catalyst that sort of brought this transition on, or was it your decision? You'd done what you wanted to do, and it was your time to just move on and to start your second chapter.
Women's rugby is so interesting because it's still becoming professional, right? So it's
Yep.
not that we're being paid a ton of cash to play the sport that we love. It's getting there and it will get there, especially in the next decade. Um, but I feel like for most women, as they're playing, especially as they're getting older, there are two pieces that affect us if we want to start a professional career. Most of us are doing it simultaneously. We're living dual lives, which I was doing. We're looking to see if we can and want to start a family, and professional players, regardless of the sport, can jump on that journey much earlier while they're playing. Um, and there really isn't a time where we make a formal transition. It's usually we're not selected anymore, or we pull ourselves out for whatever specific reason. So um, I think I knew at the second World Cup, assuming I made the team, that I would be done at that time. At the end of that year, I would be 32, and then you kind of do the math, like, okay, at the next World Cup, sure, it's only 3 years. Okay, I'd be 35. But what does that look like on the timeline for my life after sport? It's the hardest decision. Normally, like in a decade, that decision won't be as big of a factor as it is. Um, but it is a personal decision to say, oh yeah, mentally, I could go another three years, or even physically, for sure, I could go another 3 years. For me, it was more of the mental grind. You can push the body and you can trick it to playing really well, but always being like mentally aggressive to like hit um, that top line skill at training, or put everything in a game and leave home for periods at a time. It gets harder and harder and harder. And for me, especially my last season in the Prem, I started to lose that love being away because I was missing a part of me back at home.
mm,
Like I wasn't growing what my life would be like after
Mhm.
sport was gone. At least that's what I knew and what I'm glad I did. And I had a lot of people that were like, it's only 3 years. It's only 3 years.
Yeah.
Like, why wouldn't you wait 3 years? It's not a 4-year cycle. But I knew after that World Cup, I needed to have a hard stop. I needed that, or else I would just keep going and wait until selection, or wait until that next thing, or I wasn't selected. And I didn't want to go through that whole emotional roller coaster. Am I good enough? Should I be playing? Training hard enough? So I knew I was going to be done, and I knew that after our last game, I think when we didn't make it to the semis, that okay, that's that. And it took me a couple days to be like, no, no, I'm okay with that. But it's a hard decision regardless. But especially for the cycle now and for the women playing in the World Cup this year, you'll see a lot of drop off, but it's a hard decision, and a lot of it the players have to make. They have to make themselves.
Yeah.
Sport
Yeah.
doesn't really pull us out, or we don't really have a springboard to jump off of after we feel accomplished in sport. So we kind of have to figure that out on our own.
And this is one of the challenges that we've become acutely aware of, Kristine, talking with athletes, because obviously you have blind spots and all men are guilty of this. You're looking at your own sporting journey, you're talking to people with similar challenges. The challenge is often, what are you going to do next? How do you prepare for that? And when do you start that process? And let's make sure you don't play too long just because of fear of the unknown or from a lack of preparation. And then naturally, when you start speaking, and we've spoken to so many elite performers like yourself in different disciplines, and that whole different ballgame, that whole different challenge of actually, you have to make this really unfair choice between, well, family or stay in sport, and when do I have to step off, even if I could still keep competing? And where
Right.
that then took us is really starting to understand that we're doing a lot of work behind the scenes in the challenge that so many females have to just be an elite performer in the first place. You've talked about this vision, which I know you're very passionate about, to see the full professionalization of female sport, particularly in rugby. But you've no doubt walked this path. So I'm curious to throw this back to you, that you've played professional club rugby, you've represented your country on an international stage, but so many female athletes are also working part-time because the
Mhm.
finances are just not there. So transition in its traditional sense has been, you stop playing, you move into industry. What we
Right.
found with so many women is they're in everything all at the same time.
Yeah.
They're in industry because they have to make ends meet. They are performing with no less intensity, no less commitment or motivation to be the best they can in sport. But then they're in and out of industry, and they've also
Right.
got this dynamic on the sidelines of, when can I start a family? When am I going to stop? So, am I right in the assumption that even though you were leading your country, playing in World Cups, playing club rugby, you were also developing yourself as a businesswoman in that sort of director of business services role whilst you were playing at the highest level? So, were you wearing all those hats at the same time?
Oh yeah. And that's why it's so draining. Um, both all 3 seasons I played in the Prem, you miss out on so many experiences coming over because you're living kind of a dual life. So I would train from 9 a.m. to 2 or 3 in the afternoon, depends if we have 1 or 2 sessions. Some we'd had evening sessions, so I'd have to kind of balance that. And then I'd go back to my flat or wherever I was staying, and I would work 4 p.m. to 2:30 in the morning.
Oof.
And it was full time. I was full time US Pacific time.
Right.
Half of
Gee.
it was to make sure that I could do it because no one else in my company took leave. This is pre-COVID. Working remote is not a thing.
Hmm.
I'm the minority of the women in the company, my water treatment company, and we're heavy construction, especially at that time. So it's really rare for me to go off and do this like sport endeavor, and no one even knows what rugby is. It seems like this made up extracurricular, and I just want to go on my own and go abroad. So I feel like I had a lot of pressure to do both really well. And I did. It really makes you focus, but it makes you miss out on a lot of the joys of the game, the experiences with the team, things I had to say no to because I was working, and vice versa on the other side because I had to train. So I didn't have the ability to go in 100% on both,
Hmm.
or go out with the team, or really have the recovery I needed as a quote unquote what people think I was doing being a professional rugby player. Whereas on the other side, on my career side, um, maybe there's not understanding that I'm training full time. Like this is I'm technically professional. I'm on a visa, abroad playing sport. So
Yes.
it's really difficult. And I myself and a few other players have done it for the even before I retired for 5 years. And that's the part that's really exhausting and draining. And you feel like you just can't be present in one role. But in a way, I feel like we're very lucky. We got to set up our careers as we retired. You have other players that are working part-time, figuring out what life looks like after, which, like you said, is very daunting. So we just continue that year to year and keep playing because of the
Hmm.
what is going to come. We can prolong that.
Mm.
So in a way, yeah, sure, we got to set up our careers, but then I have other close friends that are playing and just living off a paycheck here and there, or having a room in someone's home, but they are full in, like they are bought into the game. So it's such a different uh experience, emotional space for them. Still very difficult because financially,
Yes.
they're understanding what they can and can't do. Um,
Yeah. I mean,
based on
when
the
you
week, based on the day. Yeah.
exactly
Yeah.
when you talk about mental grind, I think there'll be a lot of raised eyebrows. Say, "Wow, yeah, that's an unbelievable routine." And I was going to ask you, how long did you do that for? 5 years, and it the next point almost sounds like I'm trivializing that, which I'm not in
Yeah.
any way, shape, or form. But you use the phrase setting you up for your sort of future career. I
Yeah.
suppose the one bright spot there is that we've heard from a lot of female athletes that are doing things just to make ends meet, as you say. They're doing certain jobs that they're not getting any fulfillment from, but they just need a paycheck to allow
Right.
them to continue to compete. So the one bright star in that in unbelievable intensity of running two full-time jobs side by side, I suppose, is that you had something built in place so that at whatever point, and you talked about the semi-finals of the World Cup, that you said, okay, now's the time, I'm comfortable to step out. Perhaps with the benefit of hindsight, that made that next step post-retirement slightly easier because you had something that you've been building for a number of years, that you understood,
Right.
that you took fulfillment from. Is that a fair assessment, Kristine? That that you worked unbelievably hard for a number of years, but the reward for that is you had a line of sight of where you were going post-retirement.
Yeah, I would say so. I always look hindsight and think if USA was a professional union and I had a contract and I was making enough and maybe say there was a pregnancy policy or something where I could take a year off and start a family and know I was financially supported, I'd probably go back into the game so I can live that dual life a bit as say a player and a mother instead of all these many hats that we all wear all the time. But where the union was and kind of still is, yeah, it made me feel good. I knew I could just focus on me for a little bit. And it felt a little selfish to say, I don't want to give up weekends anymore. I don't want to give up multiple weekdays anymore. I just want to be present, emotionally present, and just see where my life goes. And that was at the transition point. And obviously, the first few months after that is where it really hit like, I made a mistake. What is going on? This is
Right,
terrible. I should just be back in the game.
right.
But it quickly set in like, no, this was the right time for me.
And again, this is something that we hear timely, and that identity, that challenge of going from the structure, the routine, the camaraderie. You talked right at the start about that commiserate, being able to share the highs and the lows with people, and then you stop. And it's very natural. It's something that I'm reflecting back to you just because I think it's so powerful for our listeners that it's okay to wrestle with that for a little bit. We've not met anybody yet that stepped out and said, I had no regrets. There wasn't a moment of me that didn't think, hang on, have I made a mistake? So it's when you've done something for so long and you stop doing it, there's almost a grieving process that you have
Oh
to go
yeah.
through, which is completely natural. Now, that's not that far behind you, Kristine, but to your credit, I just wanted to touch on some of the advocacy stuff that you're doing. And you've talked very articulately there about, well, if there was a high level of professionalism, if there was a pregnancy policy, etc., all the things that need to happen without a shadow of a doubt to get women in multiple disciplines, including rugby, to that level of professionalism that they deserve. So it
Yeah.
isn't a surprise to notice when people look into what you're doing, the advocacy work that you're doing with the 15 Foundation, and there's other bits that we're going to touch on. So I imagine your passion for fixing some of the things that you would have liked to fix for yourself has been now directed into trying to fix it for those people that walk the path behind you. Tell us a little bit about those passions that you're now working hard on behind the scenes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably too much of a fixer. Um, Myself and the co-founder of that 15th Foundation, Alicia Washington, we were the two that were working full time
Right,
the entire cycle through 2017 World Cup and forward. So that was something that we started in 2020 because the program was going even further back before they announced bankruptcy. This is right before COVID started. And quickly we were going to basically do car washes to raise money, and it
right,
just felt so mediocre. Um, and for the states, there wasn't a lot of buy-in or trust in the union, and that is getting better over time, especially as we get more publicity around the sport. But we wanted something to be built where they trusted us and players. We could get donations and give it right back to the team because they needed that, and it fulfilled a lot of gaps, a lot of wage gaps, parity gaps. How do we actually make it so people can just be here? And we're not losing players because they can't afford to get to a camp. They can't afford housing, they can't afford their flight to get to tour.
right.
So that was the initial intention, and to make sure that we were all getting paid the same. We eventually reached that parity, which is great, but there's also still no money in the game, like not enough. So there's still a lot to build on. Um, but yeah, we've been around since 2020.
Good for you.
15th Foundation, XV Foundation, whatever people want to call it, as long as we get the funds. Um, it's kind of been surreal what we've been able to create. So the big announcement for the Rugby World Cup contracts for USA went out kind of a week or two, and it's starting to get the rounds. But our foundation was written into the bonus contract. So we're fulfilling that 100%
Fabulous.
at 150,000 K for $150,000 for this Rugby World Cup. So it's kind of surreal setting up a lot of fundraising engagements, talking to a lot of really interesting people that love the game, love sport, love women in sport, just love rugby generally. So that's filled my rugby cup since I've retired.
Yes.
We get to talk to the team. We get to see what's going on. What are some issues? What are some really positive highlights? What are some things that are changing that are really great for the game? And now everything is streamlined, not paying out of pocket, but we're making sure they're getting paid enough to slowly like fill that void,
Yeah.
that financial void. So
Fabulous.
that's something Alicia and I have been doing for a long time, which is a lot of fun. And hopefully we always talk that we're not needed forever. That was never the intention. The game's
Yes.
become professionalized. We just live our lives and we just go to the games as those crazy old ladies that just want to watch the
Yeah.
game on the sideline in the box.
Yeah.
But
But
it's been a lot of fun.
but good for you. I mean, it takes everything starts with those pioneers, those people who take the first steps, who create that momentum. And as you say, hopefully, the momentum's built, it takes care of itself. But it's a fabulous thing that you've done, and probably no surprise that you've been, what's the right word? Approached, brought in, recruited into the Global Rugby Players Foundation. And we were
Yeah.
talking to Conrad Smith as a guest recently, and he's very, very passionate about all of these challenges. And you look at the collection of personalities behind that, putting a spotlight on this hugely important topic of transition. It must be a fabulous honor to have been asked, because it sounds like it aligns perfectly with your values. You're already doing very, very similar things through your Rugby 15 Foundation, and now there's another platform, another opportunity to support the needs of the players and around the world. So tell us a little bit about that role as well.
It was kind of surreal to get a WhatsApp message and then a call from Dan Carter talking to me about this foundation that we're looking to start up. Now I'm like, I'm a USA women's player, like sure, professional player, but like I'm way down the list of priorities here. But okay, sounds great. No, the group of athletes is surreal on the founders group, and being able to meet most of them in person last May. We did our launch in London, which was pretty amazing. It's great because it transitions from that 15th Foundation to this Global Rugby Foundation, Players Foundation. It's the current athletes to the retired athletes. So we're thinking in game. That's what the 15th Foundation is like. This is in game. You are financially incentivized to play as hard as you can. And now we're looking at that transition so we can actually say what happens after. And let's give you actual resources. Like let's give you that community that you're going to miss, like that locker room feeling. How do we still throw that in when you're done playing and make sure you feel fulfilled in your professional career? Maybe you're still in a sporting career. Not everyone wants to go on a broadcast. You see a very, very, very small percentage of professional athletes that go into to broadcasting, to sideline announcing. And I think that's what people think happens.
Hmm.
But there's so many that just fall off. You don't hear
Yeah.
about them anymore. Maybe they've started a family. Maybe they're thinking about it. Maybe they've gone into finance. They're into these normal 9 to 5 jobs and just living that next life after player transition. So it was a really cool opportunity that, yeah, I can't say no to this. I mean, this is kind of surreal. And I feel like there's so much engagement and there's so much really good publicity around the foundation. And we're still only getting started. Like
Yes.
it's still such in infancy. But like you mentioned earlier, hearing Conrad's story and a lot of other big players, like even last year in the publicity and the announcement of the foundation, we all got in these roundtables with different journalists. We went down in this crypt basically and had hard 10-minute rounds with different journalists, like hard start stop. And my group was Census, myself, and Johnny. And I could hear different, like obviously our stories are very, very different, but to hear theirs and both of them being so vulnerable, um, it just really speaks to what we're trying to do. Like we're just people who have played to the top of our sport, and now we're just trying to figure out who we are and what does life look like,
Yeah.
and acknowledge that whatever we're doing is okay. And we're just trying to create a community around that. So it's really empowering and it's a really fun group to be a part of.
Well, I appreciate your humility saying the surreal nature of being approached, but I think they'll have done their due diligence. And I think it shines through already in this conversation, your passion for the game, but also your passion for helping people. And therefore, I think you found the perfect place. And I'm sure you'll continue to do great things with them. But I think that point of vulnerability and humanizing this experience is so important because so many of the athletes we talk to, they think they're unique. They look around, the perhaps the scourge of social media as it is. People are in this mindset now of comparison, and they think everybody's got everything organized and buttoned up, and family life's great, and they've slipped straight into a professional space. And then you
Yeah.
hear Dan Carter talking, very openly about that struggle with identity, or you hear Johnny Wilkinson talking about that sort of mental health challenges, and you go, oh well, if some of the greatest athletes in the world struggle with transition, it's perfectly normal for anybody to struggle. So I think that from an outsider looking in has been very powerful because we see this all the time that it's natural. You're not going to stop, end one chapter, start the next, and everything be smooth. But the key thing
Right.
for us is prepare a little bit. That's the key thing
Yeah.
that we try and drive at ATA, that you don't have to have it all figured out, but
Yeah.
take opportunities where you can to start having conversations, to start exploring what interests you, and so that there's not this hard stop, what do I do now? And I suppose your journey is a little bit different because there was no time left in the day. You were working 2 days in one and you already had a career you were developing. So my next question is maybe a little bit redundant in that regard, Kristine, but I always am a big believer that you don't have regrets and life takes you where you're meant to be. However, having said that, I think for the benefit of listeners, it's always nice to tap into people's wisdom with the benefit of hindsight. So,
Sure.
in terms of transition from your experience, if you had to pull out a do or a don't, something that you look back, if you could go back in time and say, "Do you know what makes life easier, certainly when you do hang up the boots, do more of this. And what, with the benefit of hindsight, I would say, do less of this." Is there anything that comes to mind on your journey that you'd say, yeah, with the benefit of hindsight, I'd say this?
I think what I've been telling a lot of the athletes is to obviously stay present, especially when you're starting to transition out, but start to really see who's around you in your network. And that's what I used a lot and what I still use a lot of in my
Hmm.
professional network or even through the foundation. Like we get to meet a lot of really neat people, but we're so focused on the game that we forget those relationships are there and they exist. And it does make the transition a lot easier. You can pull on a lot of strings you've created throughout your playing career. It's kind of a slow down, be intentional when you shake someone's hand, get to know them, get to know what they do, and kind of put their contact in your pocketbook or whatever way you can save it.
Yeah.
Because that's a huge resource when players are done. We have a lot more companies reaching out where people just interested in doing little internships here and there, even while players are still playing. But that comes from meeting the players, that comes from networking opportunities, and they see interest in what rugby players are. I mean, they're such a very defined personality to a rugby player that is that is so hard to find in the workforce, right? Like you have someone that'll just pick up something they've never done before and go at it 100%. You have someone that's just going to trial something, even if they mess up and want feedback and then go after it again.
Hmm.
It's really hard to find people like that. And then also carry a team, but not want to really be front of that team. Like this true altruistic person that's just natural playing the game. And you don't have to be at the top of the sport, right, to have that framework or personality. I think that just comes from being in the rugby community and playing the game genuinely.
Hmm.
So that's and those are the values that I think we try to talk to our players about. Like these are the normal feelings that you have day to day, but man, employers find those so valuable. So it's really just buying in to yourself, right? Like
Yeah.
trusting your own values, trusting your intuition, that you are a hard worker, and then also utilizing that and the network that we've created to get to leverage those experiences
Yes.
and find good opportunities. Because now we're placing players earlier, we're getting them excited because, oh, maybe I do have interest in business, or I'm really good at, I want to be a teacher. And that doesn't mean be a coach necessarily. Like I want to find what that means in education. So it's really cool to leverage those experiences, but also just buy in that you're still a really good human being, and those traits transition so well into the workforce.
Yeah, and
Um,
I'm smiling, Kristen,
it's
as you say that,
beautiful.
because that is so powerful to hear from you. Because Carl and I are often saying, "You've got." Let me go back a step. People will say,
Oh
"Well, what can
yeah.
I offer? What can I? I don't know what I can bring." And you've just given a really lovely, succinct articulation of some of the traits of a rugby player, and
Oh
that's
yeah.
in so many of the players already. Well, oh, I've got that, but they're almost blind to it. But what do I bring? Well, this is what you bring, and
It's huge.
trust us, employers want that, they need that. And something again, building on what you said, Conrad talked in his interview about the ability to give and take feedback, for instance. One of the biggest challenges I see in business, wearing my other hat, when you're coaching leaders and trying to develop high performing teams, is a real difficulty in being able to dissect performance, take out the positives, address the negatives, share the learnings, embed the learnings, and go again. It's that
Right.
everybody dances around the edge. People don't want to cause offense. We're not giving and taking feedback, so we don't address the issue, so we don't get better.
Yeah.
It's second nature for so many elite athletes. They've been given and
Right.
taken feedback the whole career, embracing it with humility, not letting their ego get in their way. That's another thing to add to that suite of benefits you've talked about there, those traits to
Yep.
say, I can give and take feedback to make the business better. That's hard for a lot of employers to find, isn't it? And that's something else that rugby players do so well.
It is, and it challenges employers because we want feedback. We want to grow. We want the company to grow. And if we've completed something, as most rugby players are, or coming from professional sport, our brains are like, now what?
Hmm.
Give me something harder, or give me something I haven't done before, or let me shadow you. And
Hmm.
I want to move, I want to progress. Like there's no stall point. We don't want to get like mentally stagnated. We want to move. We want to keep learning, keep growing. So
Yeah.
it's hard to find those people. I could hire somebody that has 5, 6 years of experience, but won't take on those leadership abilities. And it feels like you have to pull it out of somebody instead of someone that's just eager to lead, to learn, to fail. I mean, such a
Hmm.
hard thing to teach. Um, those are the biggest values when you're joining a new company.
Yeah, no, well said. So I think you're going back to your do's, and you've gone into some fabulous sort of summation of the traits of elite athletes there. The do's are very important to be aware of, and be intentional. I think that's a fabulous phrase to utilize, that not just shake hands and walk through. It's something that so many guests have talked about. There's an array of opportunities all around you. If you lift your head, stop, be present, be intentional, as you say,
Mhm.
recognize those opportunities are there and go and explore them. Try and narrow down, develop an interest of what would I like to do, what would interest me,
Yeah.
and in the next chapter. So, bringing it back to the don'ts, is there anything that, with the benefit of wisdom and hindsight and all the great conversations you're having now with people, is there anything that you'd put on the radar of listeners and say, don't do this, or try and avoid doing this in order to make your transition into industry a little bit easier?
I think, and I know Conrad in the group has been saying this, we don't want players to avoid the idea of transition. It's inevitable. It's going to happen, and
Hmm.
some of us can and cannot control when it happens. But I think that's kind of what you're saying. We're not thinking about it. We're not starting that communication. We're not starting that internal dialogue of what does that look like? When am I ready? When am I not ready? It's mostly just to start to have the wheels turn. Whether that's you accepting feedback from somebody, like you said, somebody, and if not me, from my colleague or athlete A, athlete B, it doesn't matter. Start to kind of accept dialogue about what the next chapter could look like.
Hmm.
Even
Yeah,
if it's 2 months before you're ready or a year before you're ready.
yeah,
What does that look like? So we just
yeah,
want to slowly remove that barrier, that hard barrier of like, I can't think about it until I'm ready.
yeah,
It happens so quickly.
yeah,
And depending on how ready you are, how financially ready you are, or mentally ready, the sooner that the next step takes place, um, the better off that player will be. Like
yes,
that springboard needs to be ready. Even if they say, I need like 2 months to transition, I need like 3 months to transition. Well, let's have a company ready to pick you up in three and at month three.
yeah, yeah,
But that means you've done some sort of due diligence before then. You've started conversations, or you've at least acknowledged, okay, financially, what does that mean for me? Maybe this type of network I should start to pick up on. Maybe I need to do a bit more like LinkedIn posting 3 months before I retire and start to put the word out.
yeah.
It's just to kind of create those blurred lines. So don't create a hard barrier where you're not thinking about it.
Yeah, I think it.
Yeah.
Don't be in denial. It is
Don't be
such
in
a it's
denial.
such a
Yeah.
positive thing. And I was talking to my dad just the other day, and he's, as all parents do, they're listening to the podcast. Oh man, I'm enjoying these stories. And he said, well, it's like death and taxes. He said it's always that every career comes to an end at some point. I said, no, you're right. We all hope,
Yeah.
and we see this a lot, Christine, that particularly in rugby, I'll be honest, when we talk to players in their early 20s, they're in a mindset of invincibility. And I'll deal with this in my mid 30s. But then there's
Yeah.
certain circumstances economically, there's circumstances through injury that are going to bring that to the fore.
Totally.
And the worst thing is to be in that place where I didn't expect this to be happening now. And then you're
Yeah.
suddenly looking at, what's my career? What do I want to do? What am I interested in? Where's my finance coming from? Particularly if you've got dependents, partners, husbands, wives, children, etc. That pressure is a bit of a perfect storm for all the mental
Right.
health challenges that we sometimes see. So our message is very common sense based. It's like, do as much preparation as you can, as early as you can, and then if the worst happens, it happens, but you don't go into a tailspin of panic. And maybe you will play for 14 years plus, as you've done, which is amazing. But there's no guarantees. So
Right.
start that preparation to reduce the fear and uncertainty. And it's almost like you put it on the shelf. You bring it down when you need it, but you can have an unbelievable network. And again, it's like bingo. You're hitting so many things. You've got to go back to it. But LinkedIn and we do a lot with athletes around branding, because it's like, why not create a shop
Yeah.
window? Why not curate content and connect with people that are in spaces that you're interested in? It lets the world know, and it helps draw opportunities towards you.
Right.
These platforms are designed for you to be proactive on, not just skim and look at viral videos on other platforms. LinkedIn is a great place to open up the whole global business community, jump on a Zoom call with somebody. But if you don't
Yeah.
invest in it and you don't start to build your brand, nobody knows what you're interested in, and nobody knows where you want to go. So I think
Right.
that it was like bing when he said, "Don't be in denial." That's such a powerful message for every athlete.
Right.
You will have to stop playing sport at some point. There are extreme examples. There are some people going into the 40s, and certain sports lend themselves to that, but everybody stops at some point.
Yeah, and even myself, like I'm not big on social media, but I'm very active in LinkedIn. It helps my professional career and it did prior. You're going to have some athletes that really want to use the social media hubs to explore and promote and do content. And you're going to have some that don't want to. They're shy and that's okay. Like not everyone
Hmm.
wants to be in the spotlight. They want to play rugby and then that's it. Which hopefully again, that's not necessary to be this like big personal brand because the sport pays you and you just exist as an athlete. But I still recommend doing that at least a little bit to say, hey, what's out there? Like you don't
Exactly.
have to be a big brand, but
Nope.
I'm a national team player. I'm thinking about retiring. Here are a few things I'm interested in.
Hmm.
Like, who should I be talking to? It's more conversational. And
100%.
it's just acknowledge that it's okay to ask. It's okay to open those conversations up a little earlier, or
Yes.
just find one-on-one support, which would
Yeah.
be athlete transition or different people in your professional space that just want to have a conversation on what is possible. There's so many more people interested in placing athletes now
Exactly.
because
And
it's like the best way to recruit.
exactly, because and this is the thing. Anybody, I apologize for anybody that's listened to our entire back catalogue. And outside of Carl and I's parents, maybe they don't exist. But I'm going to say it just in case somebody's dialed into this for the first time. One of the things that people have a fear of is, well, what if people say no? And we always say the same line back to people. If you approach anybody in the world through LinkedIn or through an email or through an introduction from a friend or a contact, and you simply utter the words, I admire what you have done or I respect what you have achieved, would it be possible to connect with you face to face or virtually just to ask you a couple of questions and to learn a little bit from your journey? I
Right.
almost guarantee that you cannot be offended by that sentiment and somebody will come back to you and say, of course. And the
Yeah.
only no is likely to be, I can't do it right now, but let's get something in the calendar. Because the human ego finds it very difficult to repel somebody saying, I like, admire, and respect what you've done. Could you please give me some of your wisdom, please? So, this fear of I'll get rejected is invariably completely misguided. Go and test it. We encourage everybody, go and test it. Go and ask somebody
Yeah.
if you can get a bit of their advice and wisdom, and let's work out how many people. Go and ask 10 people and see how many no's you get. And invariably there isn't one. So it's just having the courage to make that approach, I think, is the key thing. And once you find a yes, as a lot of guests have said to us, then it leads to another one because you can
Oh, yeah.
finish that conversation and say, this has been really helpful. Is there anybody else in your network you think it'd be worth me talking to? Oh, yes, actually. Why don't you go and speak to Kristine over here? Oh, thank you. And then you speak to Kristine. Is there anybody else? And so the snowball rolls. So you only
Right.
really need courage at the very outset because invariably those doors continue to open. So it's a reiteration of what I'm sure you're endorsing on a daily basis as well, Kristine. But I think it's really important for people to just think, well, okay, let me find the courage to have that initial approach and see where it takes me.
Right. But also professional athletes, we go through the potential of non-selection all the time. So we're putting ourselves out there for the potential of a no.
Hmm.
We just hope we've done good enough.
Yes.
So it's we have to just reapply that to the professional space and be courageous. And a no is if a no happens, a no happens. There's
Yep.
millions of people.
You're
There's
no
millions
worse
of
off.
opportunities. But
Yep.
you are competing for probably a top 20, top 30, 32 team. You're competing for a top 23 roster. You're a 1 in 23, you're a 1 in 15 for a starting jersey. And now you're reaching out to the opportunity for millions,
Exactly.
millions of personal connections. It's so much bigger. It's just putting that into perspective. We've you've gone for this top spot for so long in your professional career, and that is something that nobody does. Nobody does. We don't put ourselves in that situation at all. And so many fans that watch sport just think of how can an athlete go through non-selection? How are they feeling? Oh my gosh, they got a jersey. What a huge opportunity. And if you flip it, yeah, we're very scared to reach out to people for the next opportunity, but it just has in a way it's reframing our brains, such a lower Like we're really taking that shield down. Like this is just you being you. No one's
Hmm.
evaluating your skill set. No one's evaluating your past. No one's evaluating what you did in a game 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just having a conversation.
And I think that's a wonderful analogy to frame it with, Kristine. And I'd add one further dimension that the modern athlete has also got to deal with the rejection and feedback that social media now allows. So in days gone
Yeah.
by, you would have the acceptance or rejections of your coach in inverted commas of saying you have been picked or you have not been picked. Then there was perhaps print media, TV media, if you were live on television, and social media has opened up a whole new world of feedback. And most sports fans are, of course, experts on their chosen discipline and are very forthright in the feedback that they give that sometimes players are exposed to, sometimes they're not. So I actually think athletes are far more resilient than they recognize because they've
Yeah.
operated in that brutality of the goldfish bowl where everybody can see what they're doing, everybody
Yeah.
has an opinion, and everybody's very forthright in giving that opinion. Then you
Yeah.
step back and go, why don't you send a private, confidential DM to somebody on LinkedIn that nobody of them can see, and you're just asking for a conversation? When you dial it back down, it's it's night and day the difference, isn't it?
It is. And most people you're sending those messages to don't know you in the professional space, especially in the States. They don't know about our rugby careers. And so it's a different, kind of have to live in two different personas. Like most people are going to know all of the things I've accomplished. Some just know me as the business development director, and that's okay. And then I can blend those when I feel
Hmm.
like that helps me, or use my background and use my professional sport to kind of jumpstart different conversations. Like even funny mentioning that I had our company just started doing the sales training with like a platform called Udemy.
Hmm.
And one of the sales professionals that was doing these trainings, I was just listening as I was like cleaning or doing chores, whatever. In the background, he had a Leinster jersey. And I posted something on LinkedIn and I added him and I was like, whoa, where are you living? And then we jumped on and started chatting so quickly. But it's just funny how small conversations, how small the networks are.
Yeah.
And it just takes a little bit of vulnerability. It's
Yeah.
just a little bit, but it's night and day difference from what a professional athlete goes through to go to get selected for like the top tier of their sport in their nation, in the world.
Absolutely. No, well said, Chrissy. I've loved this conversation, Carl. I know you've always got something that I've missed, or you'll be coming in from the sideline. So, have you got anything else for Christine?
Well, I've done my usual. I've just sat here as a passenger listening, which is usually what happens. I just get to sit here with a front row view and just listen, which is fantastic. But one thing we always just like to sort of finish conversations off with is success,
Yeah,
because when you're in your sporting world, success is very black and white. It's get picked for your country, go to the World Cup, just get that starting jersey on the weekend.
yeah,
But when you leave, success becomes finite. It can be anything you want it to be, and the opportunities that opens up for are so exciting. And that's one thing
yeah,
we always like to pass to current athletes is who says your sporting chapter has to be your best?
right.
That there's only a certain level you can get to within your sport. As much as it's fantastic, and most people would give their right arm to even have a chance of achieving those things. But actually, who says that has to be your best? You're
Right.
going to be out of that world for way longer than you're in it. And if you're leaving with the mindset, well, that's as good as it's going to be, you're going to be miserable for a long time. So we always like to pose that question. And just around success, it'd be really cool to just dive into to sort of your definition of success now you're out of professional rugby, and what does
Yeah.
success look like for you now in this second chapter.
Yeah, that's so true. And that's a great question as well. And success has changed for me dramatically. Obviously, success is so subjective after playing. Like you said, it's a quick dichotomy, win, lose. Have you succeeded? That's it. But now even after, say, starting a family, it's just being present. It's like this simple happiness. The work and everything comes, and that's as much as I want to accelerate in it. Like I can create my own success professionally. Even all of the things we've done with the 15s Foundation, the Global Rugby Players Foundation, those are extreme versions of success, and they're great to tout about. But for me, because it's so flipped, like just having a weekend at a park where it just feels effortless. And I'm not thinking about working out or sport or my day job or the things I haven't done that are due on Monday morning. That for me that's my version of success, which I didn't understand previously. Like
Mm.
I just want to be so present and enjoy a cup of coffee on the grass without having any other accomplishments or goals or things that are feeding me of things to do. That's my little
I love
blurb
that.
of
I think it's a very
success.
Yeah.
philosophical way to end, but it's a lovely message in itself because it's easy when you're in that sporting chapter for fear to dominate the narrative in your mind of everything you're going to
Yeah.
lose. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to be at the same financial level. I'm not going to have the
Right.
buzz of the dressing room that you've spoken about at the start of our conversation. I'm not going to get to be in such a physical peak state. All these things are there. And actually, you've just highlighted one of the simple pleasures that most athletes suddenly go, oh, I'm not playing over the holiday season, or I'm not playing straight after New Year's
Right.
Eve, or I have my weekend free. If somebody says, would you like to come to a family event? Well, let me just check the calendar. Well, it's a weekend. Yes, I can. I'm not at work. And to stop and to be present and not to feel guilty about, "Oh, I should be doing this, I should be
Yeah.
doing that." That doesn't really feature on a lot of people's radar. So I'm delighted that you put that on because that's available to everybody. The ability to actually be truly present again with those that you love the most
Yeah.
without disruption. And every athlete listening to this will be able to reel off family birthdays, friends' weddings, events that you have missed
All
because
the
you've been in
missed. Yeah.
training camps, on planes, overseas. You don't have to miss any of that anymore. So it's a lovely tonic to the fear and the anxiety to think, oh, well, one thing that's immediately available to me is presence. So I think that's a really profound way to finish our conversation, Kristine. I think people will really love to hear that. So again, just a massive thank you from Carl and I. It's been a pleasure talking to you. If people are intrigued to learn more about you or they want to reach out and connect, Kristine, we've talked about LinkedIn in the conversation. Is that the best place for people to find you if they want to reach out and connect personally?
I would say so. That's probably where I'm most active outside of, like you mentioned, scrolling other social media hubs and doing nothing on
Yeah.
it. I'm way more active on LinkedIn than I am elsewhere. So yeah,
Great.
definitely.
Well, we'll,
Perfect.
we'll we'll send people your way. I'm sure it's not going to be the last time we talk. And congratulations for everything you've built so quickly after leaving the sport. Very best of luck
Thank
with all
you.
the advocacy work that you're doing with men and women in the sport around the world. And it's been a pleasure talking to you. So thanks again for your time.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thanks for joining us this week on our ATA podcast. If you found this conversation insightful and it resonates with your journey, please subscribe, follow the show, and stay connected with us for more insight, resources, and information on how we at ATA are supporting your preparation for life beyond the game.